Welcome to Sinister Truths, the channel where dark history, hidden stories, and unsettling realities come to light. Before we begin, let us know in the comments which country you're watching from and what time of day it is for you. And make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a chilling story. The rain had been falling since morning, the kind of slow, stubborn rain that didn't splash so much as cling to cobblestone, to wool coats, to the edges of people's moods. Edinburgh looked rinsed of color. Even the street lamps in the old town seemed tired, their flames tucked low behind fogged glass like eyes that didn't want to witness too much. Inside the Sheriff Court Records office, the air smelled of ink, dust, and damp paper that had outlived its makers. The building held silence the way a church held hymns, carefully, reverently, with a warning that too much noise would bring disapproval. Ewan McCrae sat at his usual desk beneath a high window that never fully brightened. He was 23 and already carried himself like someone older. Shoulders held tight, jaw set, hair cut neat, not from vanity but from habit. The kind of habit built by years of learning that disorder invited punishment. His work was simple in description and endless in practice. Copy names, dates, and testimonies from official bundles into ledgers that would be stored for decades. He wrote other people's troubles into permanence. He made grief and theft and violence into clean lines of ink, as if neat handwriting could make the world behave. He had just dipped his pen when a shadow passed over his desk. He looked up expecting Mr. Dalrymple, the senior clerk, to hover and correct his spacing. No one stood there, yet something lay on the wood, perfectly aligned with the edge of his blotter, a folded sheet of paper, pale and dry, as if it had never been touched by Edinburgh's wet day. Ewan frowned. In a room like this, things didn't appear. Everything came by stamp, by signature, by chain of custody. Even gossip arrived with a knock. He picked up the paper. It was heavier than it looked, thick rag stock like a parish certificate. There was no seal, no wax, no crest, nothing to mark it official. No address written on the outside. No smudge of handling. A note like that should have been impossible. He glanced around. Across the room, other clerks bent over their work, scratching pens in a steady rhythm. Their faces were lowered. No one watched him. Near the door, the supervisor's chair sat empty. Mr. Dalrymple had gone out to argue with someone about missing files and would return in a mood sharp enough to cut parchment. Ewan unfolded the paper slowly, careful not to tear it. Only one line had been written, but the ink looked unusually dark, as if it had been pressed into the fibers. If you ever lived at Blackwell, come before the month dies. Bring a lamp. Ewan read it twice. His first thought was that it was a cruel joke. His second thought was worse, that it wasn't. He hadn't spoken the name Blackwell aloud in years. He hadn't written it. He hadn't even allowed himself to think it clearly, only as a blurred shape behind the eyes, something he kept in the same place as childhood fevers and old bruises, real, but unhelpful to revisit. Blackwell Orphanage, stone walls, thin blankets that always smelled faintly sour, the scrape of bowls, hymns sung without joy. His fingers tightened around the paper until it creased. He looked again at the handwriting. It wasn't familiar to him, yet it carried a certain steadiness, as if the writer had learned to write, not in school but in secret. McCrae. Ewan jerked slightly. Mr. Dalrymple had returned without sound, which was his way, an old man who took pride in arriving like consequences. "You have copied the McNair testimony wrong," Dalrymple said, sliding a finger across the ledger to point at a single word. "You've written barrel, where it clearly says barrister." Ewan forced his eyes back to the page. "Yes, sir." Dalrymple's gaze flicked to the folded paper. "What's that?" Nothing," Ewan said too quickly, then steadied himself. "A personal note." Dalrymple sniffed, unimpressed. "Personal notes belong at home, not among the court ledgers." "Yes, sir," Ewan slipped. The paper beneath his blotter, but the movement felt like hiding a knife. Dalrymple moved on, muttering about modern clerks and their wandering attention. The scratching of pens resumed around Ewan as if nothing had happened, but Ewan couldn't return to the testimony. The words on the hidden paper burned behind his eyes. If you ever lived at Blackwell. Who knew? How would anyone know? His time there had been brief, only a season, perhaps two, after his mother died and before his father remembered to be a father again. No one in Edinburgh spoke about children who passed through orphanages. They were like stray cats, seen then forgotten. Yet someone had chosen him specifically. Come before the month dies. Bring a lamp. The phrasing bothered him most. It wasn't before the month ends. It was dies. A word chosen by someone who thought of time as something that bled and stopped. Ewan's pen hovered over the ledger, motionless. He told himself he would ignore it. He told himself it was nonsense. He told himself there were practical things to do, rent to pay, work to finish, quiet evenings to maintain. But the note had entered the room like a ghost and refused to leave. When the office bell finally signaled closing, Ewan packed his satchel with the day's copies and made his way out into the rain. Edinburgh's streets were darker now, the sky pressing low like a lid. Horse carts rattled past, wheels slicing the puddles. A beggar called out near the wind, voice hoarse and thin. Ewan walked faster than he meant to, boots splashing, collar up. He lived in a small rented room above a baker's shop on Canongate. The warmth of bread usually made the stairwell comforting. Tonight the smell turned his stomach. He climbed to his room, locked the door and set the satchel down. Only then did he pull the note out again and lay it flat on his table beside the candle. Under the candlelight, the ink looked almost black-red, as if it held more than pigment. He read it again. Then, because he had learned long ago that fear grew in vagueness, he decided to find facts. The records office had rules, but Ewan had keys. He waited until full dark, then returned to the building through the side entrance that clerks used. The guard on duty was new, and liked Ewan because Ewan never made trouble. Ewan nodded, said he'd forgotten a bundle, and the guard waved him through without suspicion. Inside, the office was empty and echoing. The lamps along the corridors were dimmer at night, their light stretched thin. Ewan's footsteps sounded too loud. He went to the archive room and took out the iron key he kept for official purposes, though this was not one of them. The lock turned with a reluctant groan. The archive smelled older than the rest of the building. Mildew and leather and the faint metallic scent of rusted clips. Shelves rose to the ceiling, full of volumes that recorded the lives of people no one remembered anymore. Ewan moved quickly, selecting the kinds of records that might mention Blackwell, parish charity lists, orphan admissions, inspector reports. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for. He only knew the note had pulled something loose. He found a parish register that included children removed to institutions. Blackwell appeared as a neat line item in several years, treated like a shipping destination. He flipped through names. Most entries had outcomes: apprenticed, returned to family, deceased, sent to service. But when he reached the year 1819, 3 years ago, he noticed something odd, a run of names, a line of children admitted to Blackwell in spring and summer, and then nothing. No discharge, no death, no apprenticeship, no service placement, no note at all. Just blankness where outcomes should be. At first, Ewan assumed the register keeper had simply been careless. Then he found another book, from a different office, a different hand. The same names were present, the same blank outcomes. His candle burned lower. He flipped again, checking older years, searching for patterns. The blankness repeated. Not everywhere, not for all children. But for a specific set. Ewan counted them with the point of his pen, marking each silent end. 1, 2, 3. He stopped when he reached 10, because the number was already wrong enough. He kept going. 20, he swallowed. 29. 29 children admitted to Blackwell across a span of years, recorded in multiple registers, and then, like a cut rope, their official histories ended. Not dead, not alive, not placed, not returned, just gone from paper. Ewan sat back, staring at the tally mark he'd made in pencil. Paper didn't forget like people did. Paper was supposed to be cruelly loyal. If names stopped appearing, it meant either the system failed or someone made it fail. His hand trembled, and he steadied it against the desk. If those children had died, there would be burial records. If they'd been apprenticed, there would be contracts. If they'd been moved, there would be transfers. But there was no trail. Only an intake, and then silence. Ewan thought of Blackwell's halls. The way sound traveled too far. The way the matron's shoes always approached from behind, never in front. The way some beds were empty one day and no one asked why the next. He closed the registers carefully, returning them to their places as if any roughness might wake something. He locked the archive room again and left the building with his satchel feeling heavier than paper should be. Back in his room, the rain tapped the window like impatient fingers. Ewan set the note on the table again and stared at it until the candle guttered. He tried to sleep. He did not. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the blank lines in the registers where children's lives should have continued. He heard the phrase, "before the month dies," as if spoken beside his bed. Morning brought gray light and no relief. At the office, Ewan copied testimonies with hands that moved automatically while his mind paced elsewhere. He made no mistakes, because fear had always sharpened him. But the work felt unreal, like copying from a world that didn't matter. At midday, he folded the note into his pocket, and made a decision that felt less like choice and more like surrender. He would go, not because he wanted to, not because it was sensible, but because now he knew something was wrong, and knowing without acting felt like cowardice. He finished his shift, collected his wages, and went to the market to buy supplies: a cheap oil lamp, a small flask of oil, a piece of bread and cheese. He bought a second candle as well, though he didn't know why. Habit, perhaps, or the old orphan instinct. Always have one more light than you think you need. By late afternoon, he left Edinburgh, taking the road north. The countryside opened up into wet fields and low hills. The rain eased into mist. Sheep stood like pale stones in the distance. Crows watched from fence posts, still and patient. Ewan walked for hours, boots sinking slightly with each step where the ground turned soft. His satchel rubbed his shoulder raw. The lamp knocked gently against his hip like a reminder. As the light began to fail, he reached a familiar stretch of land, the moorland that lay near Blackwell. The air here tasted different, more peat-heavy, more lonely. The wind came low over the grasses, whispering in a language that felt too old. Then he saw it. Blackwell Orphanage sat on a rise above bogland, its stone walls darkened with moisture, its windows narrow and mean. It looked less like a home and more like a fortress designed to keep things in. Ewan stopped at the edge of the path, staring. He had imagined it smaller. Perhaps his childhood memory had exaggerated it. But no, seeing it now, he realized memory had softened it. The place was larger than it had ever felt, and somehow colder. The main gate was iron, set into a low stone wall. It should have been locked. Ewan remembered chains. He remembered the gate's harsh squeal. Now a chain was there, a heavy one looped around the bars, but the lock looked wrong, not broken, not open, just loosely resting, as if it had been placed there for show, like a warning no longer enforced. Ewan approached slowly. His breath made faint fog. He reached for the gate, half expecting it to resist. It swung inward with a low, obedient creak. He froze. He looked at the chain again. It was still looped, still heavy. Yet the gate moved anyway, as if the iron no longer cared about its own constraints. A chill crawled up Ewan's spine. He stepped into the courtyard. The orphanage's front yard was a stretch of stone and mud, with a dead tree off to one side that looked struck by lightning long ago. Puddles lay in shallow dents, and each time Ewan stepped, the water trembled outward in rings, as if something beneath was listening for his weight. He approached the front door. The door was tall oak with iron strapping. He remembered that door. He remembered waiting behind it, hungry, while someone decided whether he was worthy of entry. Now, no one asked. No one knocked from inside. Ewan lifted his hand to rap the wood. Before his knuckles could touch, the door opened. Not suddenly, not violently. Slowly, as if someone had been holding it, waiting for the right second to let go. A thin wedge of darkness appeared inside the doorway. The smell that drifted out was old stone and stale porridge and something else. Something faintly medicinal, like bitter herbs. Ewan's throat tightened. A figure stood in the doorway, an old woman in a plain gray dress, hair pulled back tightly, face lined not just with age but with something heavier. Watchfulness carved into skin. Her eyes were bright in the dim, too clear, too awake. She looked at Ewan as if she recognized him instantly. "Back already?" she said, voice soft and dry. Ewan swallowed. I received a note." The old woman tilted her head slightly, like listening beyond him. "Did you come alone?" "Yes." Her gaze lingered on his satchel, then on the oil lamp. "You brought it," she murmured, as if confirming something. Ewan's fingers tightened around the lamp handle. "Who are you?" The old woman didn't answer directly. Instead, she leaned closer until Ewan could see the pale veins beneath her thin skin. Her voice dropped to a whisper that felt wrong in the open doorway, like speaking in a place that demanded silence. "Don't say their names in the hall," she said. "The house listens." Ewan's stomach went cold. Whose names? The old woman stepped back, turning inward. She didn't gesture for him to follow. She simply walked away, and the emptiness beyond her felt like an invitation and a threat at once. Ewan hesitated on the threshold. The air behind him was damp but honest, wind and rain and open sky. The air inside Blackwell felt thick, like breath held too long. He stepped in. The door closed behind him with a sound that wasn't a slam but a decision. Final, heavy, and impossibly certain. Ewan turned toward the dark corridor, oil lamp raised, somewhere in the building. Faint and far, something made a small sound. Not a footstep, not a creak, a soft laugh, like a child trying not to be caught. Ewan's skin prickled, and the old woman's whisper returned in his mind, sharper now. "The house listens." Ewan stood with his back to the closed door, oil lamp lifted chest high. The flame inside the glass chimney steadied after its brief wobble, throwing a weak amber pool onto the corridor floor. The hall was narrower than he remembered, or perhaps the darkness made it feel that way. Like the walls had crept inward over the years, tightening their grip on the space between them. The old woman had already vanished around the bend. Ewan could hear nothing of her steps. That was the first wrong thing. Even the lightest shoe should have made some sound on these. Boards, he inhaled, and the air tasted faintly of boiled oats and damp stone. Under it, thin as a thread, was a sharper note, medicinal and metallic, like pennies rubbed on herbs. It stirred something in him that he didn't want stirred, the memory of being sick here once. Sweating under a blanket while the matron's shadow crossed the bed again and again without speaking. A small laugh echoed again, closer this time, then stopped abruptly as if someone had clapped a hand over a mouth. Ewan swallowed and began walking. Each step made the lamplight swing, and the shadows along the walls swayed like hanging bodies. The boards didn't creak under him the way they should have. They gave soft, dull responses, as if dampness had swollen them to silence. It felt less like walking through a building, and more like moving through something that had grown around him. He passed the first door on the left, plain wood with a chipped knob. A thin line of light showed beneath it, too bright to come from any candle. As he neared it, the light dimmed, fading like breath being held. Ewan paused, listening. Nothing. He moved on, telling himself it was only his lamp shifting. Farther down, the corridor opened into the main hall, where the ceiling rose higher and the air grew colder. His lamp made only a small circle in the wide space. The rest of the hall stayed black, swallowing detail. He remembered this place, a coat rack, a cross above it, a long runner rug worn threadbare in the center. The rug was still there, but now it looked darker, almost wet, as if it had been dragged through mud. He stepped onto it and felt a faint give beneath his boot, like stepping onto something that wasn't quite fabric. He lifted the lamp closer. For a moment he thought he saw footprints, small wet marks pressed into the rug, toes splayed slightly, as if the child had been barefoot and cold. The prints were arranged in a line that led deeper into the building. His stomach tightened. He bent slightly, holding the lamp low to catch the shape of them. The marks faded, not dried, not smeared, simply vanished, as if the rug had swallowed them the way the hall swallowed light. Ewan straightened quickly, heart beating too hard for a man simply standing in a corridor. He forced himself to continue, following the direction the old woman had gone. His lamp flame hissed softly, as if annoyed. The old woman appeared again at the far end of the hall, not moving, just standing beside a doorway. She was positioned perfectly in the lamp's weak reach, her face half lit, half lost. "You came," she said, in oilcloth, and set it on the table with a dull thud. "My name is Dern," she said. "Mrs. Dern. I was matron here when this place was full." Ewan's mouth went dry. "You were the matron when I was here?" Her gaze flicked to him, sharp, quick, then away. "Briefly," she said. "Yes, you were the one with the split lip who refused to cry." Ewan's heart stuttered. He had not spoken of that moment to anyone. He had barely remembered it himself until now. "How," he began. "I remember," she cut in. "You think we forget children, we don't. We forget our own guilt sometimes, but not your faces." Ewan swallowed. "Why did you send me a note?" Mrs. Dern placed her palm flat on the oilcloth-wrapped ledger. "Because the month is nearly dead," she said, repeating the strange phrasing with a kind of resigned bitterness. "And because this house has begun to wake." She unwrapped the ledger carefully, as if exposing something dangerous. The cover was worn leather, There was no title on it, no crest, no official mark. It looked like a personal notebook that had survived too long. Ewan leaned in. "What is that?" "The book they never showed the parish," she said. "The book that explains the missing lines." His throat tightened. "The missing children." She nodded once. 29. Ewan flinched at the number being spoken aloud. It felt too exact, too deliberate. Mrs. Dern opened the ledger. The pages were filled with neat entries, each line crisp. But there was something wrong immediately. Beside each child's name, written in a different ink, was a single word, repeated again and again. Gift. Ewan's mouth went dry. Gift to whom? Mrs. Dern's fingers tightened around the edge of the page. To the man who built Blackwell. The man whose money kept it standing. The man who demanded it stay private. Ewan stared at the word gift until it blurred. The benefactor. Mrs. Dern's eyes sharpened. Do you know of him? I know the name, Ewan admitted. People said Blackwell was well-funded and strict. They never spoke of the man himself. They wouldn't, she said. It was safer not to. Ewan forced himself to breathe. Where did the children go? Mrs. Dern didn't answer. Instead, she closed the ledger, wrapped it again, and shoved it back into the drawer as if it had burned her. Then she moved toward the door and listened, head tilted. Do you hear that? She whispered. Ewan held his breath. At first he heard nothing but the lamp flame's hiss and his own pulse. Then, very faintly, came a sound from the hall, a soft scuff, like bare skin on wood. Another scuff. Then a pause. Ewan's skin prickled. Footsteps, he said. Mrs. Dern's gaze snapped to him. No, she whispered. Not footsteps, it's remembering. Ewan didn't understand. And before he could ask, she grabbed his arm and pulled him behind the sideboard, forcing him to crouch. Stay low, she hissed. Do not speak. Do not say any name. Do not... The dining hall door creaked. Ewan watched from behind the sideboard's leg as the door swung inward by a few inches, then stopped, as if someone had opened it just enough to listen. The hallway beyond was dark. No lantern light, no shape. But the air inside the dining hall changed. It grew colder, the way air changes before a storm breaks. The lamp flame leaned toward the open crack, stretching as if drawn. A child's voice floated in through the gap, soft and near, wrong in the way it knew too much. Mrs. Dern? Ewan's stomach lurched. Mrs. Dern's grip on his arm tightened to pain. The voice continued, almost sweet. Are you hiding again? Ewan's mouth went dry. He had heard voices in this building as a child when no one was there. He had told himself it was imagination. He had never dared ask anyone. Mrs. Dern's lips barely moved. Don't answer, she mouthed. The voice shifted, becoming more familiar, and Ewan felt his blood go cold. Ewan? He almost rose. The sound, so gentle, so precise, carried him in an instant to a narrow bed and a girl with straw-pale hair slipping him crusts when the matron wasn't looking. Mary. His chest tightened. His mind screamed at him that it couldn't be her, that it was impossible. That Mary would be grown now if she lived, and dead if she didn't, and in neither case would she be whispering through a crack in a door in the dark. But his body didn't care about logic. His body cared about longing. He leaned forward despite himself, eyes fixed on the door crack, lamplight trembling on his knuckles. Mrs. Dern clamped a hand over his mouth with sudden ferocity. The voice at the door became coaxing, almost pleading. Ewan, I'm hurt. I'm in the infirmary. Bring the lamp. The lamp flame flared slightly, as if it liked being summoned. Ewan's mind split into two parts, one screaming no, the other whispering. What if? Mrs. Dern's whisper was harsh in his ear. That isn't Mari. That's what the house makes when it wants you softened. The voice stopped being sweet. The words came slower, flatter, with something hungry underneath. Bring the lamp. The door opened wider. Darkness spilled in like water. Ewan's heart hammered. He could see the edge of the hallway now, but still no shape. Yet he felt a presence like pressure against skin, like standing close to a wall in the dark and knowing something is on the other side. The lamp flame bent toward it again, pulled as if by a draft that wasn't air. Mrs. Dern's breathing was shallow. Count, she mouthed, to 10. If it doesn't enter, we move. Ewan counted silently while Mrs. Dern held him down. 1, 2, 3. The darkness at the door seemed to thicken. The shadow line beneath the door stretched farther into the room. Ewan thought he saw something like wetness glimmer on the floor, small marks appearing one by one, as if invisible feet were stepping inside. 4, 5, 6. The marks advanced, not splashing, not making sound. Just appearing, deliberate, patient. 7, 8. Mrs. Dern's fingers dug into his shoulder. 9. A faint giggle came from the darkness, close now, too close. 10. Mrs. Dern moved like someone who had rehearsed fear for years. She shoved Ewan sideways, both of them sliding along the wall toward a narrow door at the back of the dining hall. The giggle stopped. The lamp flame flared violently, then dipped, as if struggling. Mrs. Dern opened the narrow door without sound and pushed Ewan through into a service corridor. The air here was even colder, and it smelled of wet coal. They slipped into the corridor and shut the door behind them. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, from the dining hall door came a soft click, like a latch being tried. Then another. Mrs. Dern leaned close to Ewan, eyes fierce. "Do you understand now?" she whispered. "The house listens. It repeats. It lures." Ewan's voice came out hoarse. "What is that thing?" "It's not one thing," she said. "It's what's left when you make children disappear without ending their story." Ewan's stomach turned. "You mean they're still here?" Mrs. Dern didn't answer directly. She turned and moved down the service corridor. Ewan followed, lamp held low. The narrow passage led them past storage rooms and a stairwell that descended into the kitchen area. They emerged into a smaller hallway. Mrs. Dern stopped by a door with a brass plate, tarnished but readable. "Infirmary." Ewan stared at it. The voice had said infirmary. His pulse jumped. Mrs. Dern's expression tightened. "It always chooses that word," she murmured, "because it knows it works." She reached into her dress and pulled out a key on a string around her neck. The key looked old, the metal worn smooth where fingers had rubbed it. Ewan watched her hand tremble slightly as she inserted it into the lock. "You kept the key," he said. "Some doors you keep keys for," she replied, "so you can pretend you still have control." She turned the key. The lock clicked. The infirmary door opened. Inside, 3 iron beds lined one wall, blankets folded too neatly. A cabinet stood in the corner with jars and cloths. The air smelled strongly of spirits and herbs, and beneath it was that metallic note again, blood remembered by wood. Ewan's lamplight fell on the far wall where a canvas hung half-torn, like someone had tried to cover something quickly. Mrs. Dern walked straight to the canvas and gripped it with both hands. Ewan's throat tightened. "What is behind that?" Mrs. Dern's eyes met his. "Where they went," she said. She yanked the canvas down. Behind it was a section of brick wall, except the bricks were arranged oddly, the mortar lines uneven, like hurried work. The surface looked solid, but it didn't belong. It was a mask. Mrs. Dern pressed her palm against it. A hollow thunk answered. Ewan felt his stomach drop. "A hidden passage." Mrs. Dern nodded. "The Mercy Way," she said bitterly. "They called it mercy because it sounded better than theft." Ewan stepped closer, lamp held up. The light revealed scratches in the mortar lines, thin, frantic, child-made. Letters formed unevenly as if carved with a nail or a broken spoon. Ewan leaned in until his breath fogged the brick. The message was partially worn but readable enough. "We are not dead. We are kept below." Ewan's hands began to shake so violently the lamplight jumped on the wall. "Below," he whispered. "Below the orphanage?" Mrs. Dern's face looked like stone that had learned to regret. "Below the ground," she said. "Below the rules. Below anything decent." Ewan swallowed hard. "Why are you telling me this now? Why not years ago?" Mrs. Dern's jaw clenched. "Because I tried to run once," she said, "and the house brought me back." Ewan stared at her. "How?" She looked away. "It reminded me of what I'd done, and it reminded me it still held the children. Guilt is a leash. Blackwell knows how to pull it." Ewan's mind raced. "Then why send for me? Why me?" Mrs. Dern's eyes slid to his lamp. "Because you survived," she said. "Because you left before you were marked. Because you still carry a piece of this place in you, but you're not chained to it like I am." A sound came from behind them. A bed creaked. Ewan turned sharply. The third bed at the end of the row, empty a moment ago, now looked as if something pressed down on the mattress. The blanket lay smooth, but the shape beneath it was unmistakable. Small shoulders, a head, knees drawn up. Ewan's blood went cold. "No," he whispered. The blanket rose once, slowly, like breathing. Then again, Ewan's lamp flame trembled, bending toward the bed. Mrs. Dern stiffened. "Don't," she hissed, grabbing Ewan's sleeve. "Don't look too long." But Ewan couldn't stop. His eyes were locked on the shape, on the steady rise and fall. If it was real, if a child was there, then every instinct in him screamed to help. A thin voice came from under the blanket, muffled but clear, as if the cloth was only a polite barrier. "Open the wall, Mrs. Dern," the voice whispered. "It's time." Mrs. Dern's face drained of color. She looked at Ewan as if begging him to understand without words. Ewan's throat worked, but his voice wouldn't come. He could only stare at the bed, at the blanket that kept breathing. The voice spoke again, softer now, almost familiar. "And bring the lamp." Behind the infirmary door, in the hallway outside, something scraped slowly along the floor, like bare feet dragging, approaching. Mrs. Dern's grip tightened. "We can't stay here," she whispered. "If it gathers enough, it will open the way on its own." Ewan forced himself to move, turning back to the brick wall. "You can open it?" he asked, voice shaking. Mrs. Dern nodded once, but her eyes were full of dread. "Yes," she said. "And once it's open, we may not be the ones who decide what comes out." The scraping in the hall grew closer. Ewan lifted the lamp higher, flame flaring as if excited, as if T had been waiting for this moment since the note first appeared on his desk. Mrs. Dern reached toward the bricks, fingers hovering as if touching a wound. "Then open it," Ewan whispered. Mrs. Dern's eyes flicked to the bed one last time. The blanket rose and fell, patient and certain. She pressed her palm to the bricks. From somewhere deep inside the wall, something clicked, quiet, mechanical, like a lock answering a command it remembered too well. And the scratching in the hallway stopped, right outside the infirmary door, as if whoever or whatever was there had paused to listen. In the sudden silence, Ewan realized something with sick clarity. The house wasn't merely listening to names, it was listening to choices, and it had just heard his. The click echoed through the infirmary wall like a swallowed sound, not loud enough to alert, not soft enough to be imagined away. The brickwork beneath Mrs. Dern's palm shifted, only a fraction at first, then settled again, as if testing whether it was truly being asked to move after so many years of pretending to be solid. The scraping outside the infirmary door did not resume. Ewan felt the silence stretch, thin and taut, like skin pulled too far. His lamp flame leaned toward the wall now, no longer wavering but drawn with purpose, as if the opening behind the bricks were breathing it in. Mrs. Dern lowered her hand and exhaled slowly through her nose. "It knows," she murmured. "It always knows when the mercy way is about to open." Ewan swallowed. "Then why hasn't it stopped us?" Her eyes flicked toward the bed. The blanket rose, fell, rose again. "Because," she said quietly, "it wants to see what you'll do." She pressed the bricks again, this time in a deliberate sequence, upper left, lower right, center, movements that had lived in her muscles long after she'd tried to forget them. The wall responded with a deeper shift. Mortar cracked softly, like knuckles bending. A vertical seam appeared. Cold air poured through it, sharp and damp, carrying the scent of peat and something older, something that had never been meant to touch light. Ewan stepped closer, lamp raised. The seam widened slowly, revealing darkness behind it, not empty darkness, but depth. Stone steps descended into it, curving out of sight. The hidden stair. Mrs. Dern's shoulders sagged as if the years she'd carried finally pressed back down on her. "Once we step through," she said, "the house will no longer pretend this is a wall." Ewan glanced back at the bed. The blanket still breathed, patient, certain. The infirmary door creaked softly, not opening, just settling, as if someone, or something, had leaned against it from the other side. Ewan's pulse hammered. "We have to go now." Mrs. Dern nodded once. "Take the lamp, I'll follow." He stepped into the opening. The first step was slick with moisture. The stone felt colder than the air above, leaching warmth through his boot soles. The lamplight barely touched the walls, revealing stone worn smooth by hands and feet that had no right to be here. Behind him, Mrs. Dern hesitated only a heartbeat, then followed, pulling the infirmary canvas back into place as the bricks continued to part. The wall did not close behind them. It waited. They descended slowly, each step careful. The stairs spiraled tighter than Ewan expected, forcing his shoulder close to the wall. Water dripped somewhere below, steady and patient, counting time in a language the house understood. As they went deeper, the air thickened. The smell of herbs faded, replaced by wet earth and iron. The lamp flame burned lower but steadier, as if it preferred this place. Ewan noticed markings along the wall, scratches at first, then lines carved with purpose. tally marks, dozens of them, some grouped in sets, some broken off mid-count, some crossed out violently, as if whoever had carved them had lost control. He slowed, lamp held closer. Between the tallies were words etched. Ed, unevenly. He comes on Thursday. Don't drink the milk. The red room lies. Ewan's throat tightened. They were trying to warn someone. Mrs. Dern's voice came from behind him, hollow. They were trying to warn each other. The stair opened into a tunnel supported by old timber beams. The wood was dark with age, swollen from moisture, but still strong. Water pooled in shallow channels along the floor. Ewan stepped off the last stair and nearly slipped. He caught himself and froze. The tunnel floor was arranged, not neatly, not decoratively, but deliberately. Small objects lay in rows on flat stones placed just above the damp ground. Buttons of different colors. Hair ribbons faded to near white. A wooden horse with one leg missing. A cracked slate pencil, a tiny shoe, 29 groupings. Ewan's stomach lurched. These are their things. Mrs. Dern nodded. What they couldn't carry through. Through where? She didn't answer. Her gaze fixed farther down the tunnel, where darkness bent around a corner. Ewan felt it then. A presence. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to feel like pressure behind the eyes. He raised the lamp instinctively. The flame did not flicker. From around the bend came a sound that did not belong to water or wood. Tap, a pause, tap. The sound of a cane striking stone. Mrs. Dern stiffened. He's early, she whispered. Ewan's heart dropped. Who? But he already knew. They moved back into the shadow of a support beam as the sound grew closer. Ewan lowered the lamp slightly, though the flame seemed reluctant to dim, casting long shadows that twisted along the tunnel walls. Light appeared first, a bright lantern beam, cleaner and stronger than Ewan's own. Then a silhouette stepped into view. The man walked with unhurried confidence, cane tapping in a steady rhythm. His coat was long and well-tailored, dark fabric untouched by the damp. Gloves covered his hands. At his throat, something silver caught the lantern light briefly. He stopped near the rows of children's belongings and knelt, setting his lantern on the ground. Ewan's breath caught. The man lifted a faded ribbon between gloved fingers, touching it with a care that made Ewan's skin crawl. Order, the man murmured, almost to himself. They always respond better to order. Mrs. Dern's whisper barely reached Ewan's ear. Do not move, do not speak. The man rose and turned slightly, as if listening. Ewan felt the weight of that attention slide over the darkness where they hid. Mrs. Dern, the man said pleasantly. You've been restless. She did not answer. He smiled, though Ewan could not yet see his face clearly. And you've brought company, he added. That's new. Ewan's grip tightened on the lamp. The flame flared, traitorous. The man turned fully toward them. Lantern light revealed his face, and Ewan felt recognition strike like cold water. He had seen this face before, not in flesh, but in oil and canvas, in a portrait upstairs, faded and cracked, the features worn by years of neglect. Here the face was intact, older than Ewan but not old. Lines at the eyes, silver at the temples, skin unmarked by hardship. A face preserved by means that had nothing to do with kindness. Ewan McCrae, the man said, voice warm. You grew taller. Ewan's mouth went dry. You know me. Of course, the man replied. I know all my investments. Mrs. Dern hissed. You have no right. The man's smile widened slightly. On the contrary, he said, I have every right. This place exists because of me. Ewan swallowed. You're the benefactor. The man inclined his head. Blackwell, he said. Mr. Blackwell, if you prefer formality. Ewan's pulse pounded in his ears. Where are the children? Blackwell gestured with his cane toward the tunnel behind him. Here, there, above, below. He chuckled softly. They've been very busy. Ewan felt anger cut through his fear. They disappeared. Blackwell's eyes glint. No, they were collected. Mrs. Dern stepped forward despite herself. You promised they would be sent away, apprenticed, placed. Blackwell sighed, as if disappointed by a misunderstanding. And they were, he said, placed exactly where they were needed. Ewan's voice shook. For what? Blackwell looked at the lamp in Ewan's hand, interest sharpening. For continuance. He took a step closer, lantern light clashing with Ewan's flame. Time, Blackwell said softly, is a resource like any other. Children have so much of it and they rarely use it well. I merely redirected it. Ewan felt sick. You stole their lives. Blackwell shook his head. I preserved them, he corrected, and in doing so preserved something far more valuable. He tapped his cane once against the stone floor. From the darkness behind Ewan a sound answered, not scraping, not giggling, breathing. Ewan turned slowly. Children stood in the tunnel behind them, thin shapes, barefoot, pale. Their eyes reflected the lantern light like glass. They did not blink. Mrs. Dern's breath hitched. They follow you now, she whispered to Blackwell. Of course they do, Blackwell said. I gave them purpose. Ewan's heart hammered. Let them go. Blackwell laughed quietly. And waste all that work? He stepped closer, stopping just short of Ewan's lamp. That lamp, he said. You were told to bring it, weren't you? Ewan didn't answer. Blackwell's gaze sharpened. The lamp matters, he continued. Not for its light, for what it carries. Ewan's skin prickled. It's just a lamp. Blackwell smiled. Nothing that enters Blackwell is ever just itself. He turned and gestured toward a stone archway farther down the tunnel. The children parted in perfect unison, revealing the opening. Above it was carved a symbol, an eye split by a vertical line. The Red Room, Blackwell said reverently. The last threshold, the place where gifts are prepared. Ewan's stomach twisted. Prepared for what? Blackwell's pleasant expression fell away, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. For becoming keys. Ewan's blood ran cold. Keys to what? Blackwell met his gaze fully now. To keeping the house alive. The tunnel seemed to tighten, the beams pressing inward. The children behind Ewan began to hum, a low, uniform sound that vibrated in his bones. Mrs. Dern's voice trembled. You said he wouldn't come up here. Blackwell chuckled. I said he wouldn't come alone. Ewan felt the lamp flame surge, growing brighter, hotter. It tugged forward as if eager. Blackwell's eyes lit with satisfaction. Yes, he murmured. It remembers you. Ewan's thoughts raced. You sent the note. Of course, Blackwell said. You left unfinished. That sort of thing irritates the house. Mrs. Dern grabbed Ewan's sleeve. He wants you below, she whispered. He always brings them below. Ewan stared at the archway, at the children, at Blackwell's expectant face. And if I refuse, he asked. Blackwell tilted his head. Then the house will find another way to collect what it's owed. The hum grew louder. The children's eyes did not leave Ewan. Blackwell stepped aside, gesturing politely toward the archway. Shall we? He said. Ewan felt something shift inside him. Not courage, not bravery, but a hard, quiet refusal to be moved like a piece on someone else's board. He tightened his grip on the lamp. I want to see them, he said. All of them. Alive. Blackwell's smile returned, slow and dangerous. Then you will, he said. But understand this, Ewan McCrae. Once you cross that threshold, you belong to the Red Room until it decides otherwise. Behind them, one of the children spoke, voice thin but unmistakably real. Don't let him take the light. Ewan turned sharply. A girl stepped forward from the line, straw-pale hair hanging loose around her face. Her eyes were too old, too heavy. Mary, Ewan breathed. Blackwell's pleasant mask cracked. Just foe. An instant. And in that instant, the lamp flame leapt higher, casting the Red Room's symbol into sharp relief, an eye that was no longer closed. The house had heard them, and it was listening very closely now. The hum did not grow louder. That was the first thing Ewan noticed. It stayed exactly as it was, low even, vibrating through stone and bone alike, like a sound held in place by will rather than lungs. The children did not move closer, they did not retreat. They simply remained, eyes fixed, bodies aligned, waiting for something that had not yet been decided. Blackwell did not rush him. That too was wrong. He stood beside the archway with the patience of a man accustomed to outcomes arriving eventually, his cane resting lightly against the stone as if it were part of the tunnel itself. The red-stained symbol above the arch seemed darker now, the carved eye catching the lamp's glow and holding it. Ewan tightened his grip on the lamp. The flame was no longer merely burning. It pulsed, slowly, deliberately, as if responding to the hum rather than feeding it. Heat licked against his knuckles, not painful, but insistent. Mary stood just behind the line of children, her form clearer now than it had been a moment before, as though speaking her name had anchored her. She looked at Ewan without blinking, her expression not pleading but urgent, like someone who had already screamed and learned it was useless. Don't go in yet, she said, her voice cut through the hum without breaking it. Blackwell's eyes flicked toward her, irritation sharpening his features. You shouldn't be able to speak, he said mildly. Mary didn't look at him. You said that before, she replied, and it didn't stay true. Ewan's pulse spiked. Mary, what is this place? She glanced at the archway. Where the house keeps its promises. Blackwell chuckled softly. Listen to her, he said. She's learned so much. Ewan turned on him. What is the Red Room? Blackwell tilted his head, considering. A workshop, he said at last. A threshold, a ledger written in flesh instead of ink. Ewan felt his stomach churn. You turn children into tools. Blackwell raised a finger. I refine them. Tools are crude. These are instruments. Mrs. Dern shifted behind Ewan, her breath uneven. You told me it would end, she said hoarsely. You said once the count was reached. I said nothing about ending, Blackwell interrupted, his voice sharpening. I said the house would stabilize. He tapped his cane once. The hum deepened, not louder but fuller, like a chord completing itself. The house was starving, Blackwell continued. Old stone, old rules, old belief. You cannot build a place like this and expect it to survive on prayer alone. Ewan felt a sudden pressure behind his eyes, a sense of weight pushing inward, like memory forced too close. You fed it children, he said. Blackwell met his gaze. I fed it time. Mary stepped forward, breaking the perfect line of the children. They did not follow her movement, but their eyes tracked it. You took what we would have been, she said, not what we were. Blackwell smiled thinly. Potential is the most renewable resource there is. Ewan shook his head. You're lying. Blackwell raised an eyebrow. Am I? He gestured with his cane toward the archway. Come, see for yourself. The Red Room does not lie. Mary flinched at the words, Ewan noticed. You said the Red Room lies, he said, remembering the carving on the wall above. They wrote it themselves. Blackwell's smile faltered just slightly. Children write many things when frightened. Mary's voice cut through again, firmer now. It lies about choice. The lamp flame surged. Ewan felt it tug forward, not toward the archway but toward Blackwell. Blackwell noticed. His gaze dropped to the lamp with renewed interest. Ah, he murmured. You feel it too. Ewan's jaw tightened. Feel what? The weight, Blackwell said. The recognition. The house remembers you. Mrs. Dern gasped softly. No. Blackwell stepped closer, lowering his lantern so its light mingled with Ewan's flame. For a moment the two lights warred, shadows colliding and splitting. You were never marked, Blackwell said. Taken too soon. Returned to the world half-formed. That sort of thing irritates a structure like this. Ewan felt something twist in his chest. I was 5. And still unfinished, Blackwell replied. You left with time intact. Mary grabbed Ewan's sleeve. Her hand was cold but solid. That's why he called you back, she whispered. You're loose. Blackwell nodded approvingly. Exactly, the children's hum shifted, becoming almost expectant. You want me in the Red Room, Ewan said slowly. Blackwell inclined his head. I want you where you belong. And if I refuse? Blackwell's smile thinned. Then the house will choose another way to balance itself. Ewan looked at the children. What happens to them? Blackwell followed his gaze. They remain, they sustain, they listen. Ewan's throat tightened. Forever? Blackwell shrugged. Time is relative. Mary's grip tightened painfully. He's lying again. Ewan met her eyes. Tell me, she took a breath as if steadying herself. The Red Room doesn't make keys, she said. It makes doors. Blackwell laughed softly. Semantics. Mary shook her head. Doors that only open one way. The lamp flame flared brighter, responding to her words. Ewan felt heat climb his arm, not burning but alive, crawling beneath skin. Blackwell's eyes widened a fraction. Careful, he warned. You're stirring it. Good, Ewan said, surprising himself with the steadiness of his voice. Blackwell's expression hardened. You think this place answers to you? I think it answers to memory, Ewan said, and you've been erasing the wrong parts. The hum wavered for the first time, a note slipping out of alignment. The children stirred, not stepping forward but shifting like a held breath finally released. Blackwell snapped his cane against the stone. Enough, he said sharply. We are past debate. He reached out, not toward Ewan but toward the lamp. Ewan recoiled instinctively, pulling it back. The flame surged in response, bursting higher, flooding the tunnel with light. The shadows recoiled. Blackwell hissed, hands snapping back as if burned. You shouldn't be able to do that. Ewan stared at the flame, heart pounding. I'm not doing anything. Mary shook her head. Yes, you are, you're remembering. The tunnel shook, just a tremor, but enough to send dust drifting from the beams. Mrs. Dern cried out softly. The house! It's listening, Ewan finished. Blackwell's composure cracked. You do not control it, he snapped. I built this place. You funded it, Ewan said. That's not the same. The hum fractured into overlapping tones, no longer perfectly aligned. One of the children, small, dark-haired, stepped out of line. Then another. Blackwell turned sharply. Stay where you are. They did not obey. Mari's eyes filled with something like hope. They can hear you, she whispered to Ewan. Not him. Ewan lifted the lamp higher. The flame cast long light down the tunnel, touching each child in turn. He saw fear there, confusion, but also something else, recognition. You're not gifts, he said, voice echoing strangely. You're not keys. You're not tools. Blackwell laughed harshly. Pretty words. They're children, Ewan said, and you took their time. The lamp flared again, heat rippling outward. Blackwell staggered back a step. That's enough, he snapped. You don't know what you're breaking. Ewan met his gaze. Then tell me. For the first time Blackwell hesitated, the silence stretched. Then he spoke more quietly. The house doesn't survive on belief alone, he said. It needs continuity. It needs something to anchor it to the world as it changes. You anchored it to suffering, Ewan said. Blackwell's jaw tightened. I anchored it to certainty. Mary shook her head. You anchored it to fear. The tunnel trembled again, stronger this time. A crack ran along the stone near the archway, red dust sifting down. Blackwell's eyes widened. Stop this, he said, voice sharp with real alarm now. You don't understand what happens if the balance fails. Ewan felt the lamp grow heavier, as if filling with something denser than oil. What happens? He asked. Blackwell swallowed. The house collapses inward. Ewan glanced at the children. And them? Blackwell's silence was answer enough. Mary's voice shook. He never planned for us to leave. Ewan's chest tightened. Then we changed the plan, Blackwell snarled. You cannot rewrite the house. Ewan lifted the lamp higher, flame roaring now, casting the red room symbol into harsh relief. Maybe not, he said, but I can stop feeding it. The hum shattered into discord. The children cried out, not in pain but in shock, as if waking from a long sleep. The archway pulsed, red light flaring and dimming. Blackwell lunged forward. No! Ewan felt the lamp pull again, not toward the archway but downward, into the stone beneath his feet. Mary cried out, Ewan, don't! The floor beneath him cracked, just a hairline fracture at first, then another. The house groaned. Blackwell stumbled back, eyes wild. You're tearing it open. Good, Ewan said, heart hammering. The crack widened, red light bleeding up through it like a wound. The archway shuddered, stone grinding against stone. The red room was opening itself, not to receive, but to release. And somewhere deep below something answered, not with a hum, but with a sound like breath finally being let go. The breath rose through the crack like a tide, slow and immense, carrying with it a chill that had nothing to do with cold. It smelled of damp stone, old iron, and something sharper, like the air inside a room that had been sealed too long and then opened all at once. The lamp in Ewan's hand flared in response, the flame stretching upward until it brushed the glass chimney, whispering as if it recognized what was escaping. The children cried out again, not in unison now, their voices overlapping in confusion and fear. The hum that had bound them unraveled into individual sounds, breaths, sobs, whispers, human noises that did not belong to a machine of stone and ritual. Blackwell staggered back another step, cane scraping loudly against the tunnel floor. The confident rhythm he'd carried moments before was gone. His lantern swung wildly, casting broken shadows that crawled along the walls. Stop, he said, the word cracking at the edges. You have no idea what you're inviting. Ewan's boots shifted as the floor trembled beneath him. The fracture widened another finger's breadth, red light seeping through like blood finding a path. He felt the lamp grow heavier, as if the flame inside were drawing something up through his arm, filling it. Then tell me, Ewan said again, his voice steadier than he felt. Tell me what this place really is. Blackwell's jaw clenched. For a heartbeat he looked older, tired in a way no preserved face could hide. This house was built on a fault, he said tightly. Not stone, time. It sits where things slip. Mrs. Dern gasped softly behind Ewan. The bog, she whispered. The old stories. Blackwell shot her a sharp look. Superstition dressed as folklore, he snapped. Then his gaze returned to Ewan. But there are places where years pool instead of passing cleanly, where moments stack and rot. Blackwell was one of them. Mary took a step closer to Ewan, her eyes fixed on the widening crack. You found it, she said quietly, and you fed it. Blackwell shook his head. I stabilized it. Without intervention, it would have consumed itself, and everything built atop it. And the children? Ewan asked. Blackwell hesitated, then spoke through clenched teeth. They were conduits, anchors, they held the excess. Ewan felt something twist in his chest. You used them to plug a wound. Blackwell's eyes flashed. I gave them purpose. Mary's voice cut in sharp. You took our futures and poured them into the stone. The crack widened again, a low groan rolling through the tunnel. The archway pulsed, red light throbbing in time with the children's ragged breathing. Enough, Blackwell said, panic edging his voice now. If the fault opens fully— What? Ewan pressed. Blackwell swallowed. Time doesn't pour out cleanly. It tears, it folds, it devours what can't hold shape. The children recoiled slightly, instinctively pressing closer together. Ewan felt the weight of the lamp intensify, the flame roaring brighter, no longer content to merely burn. And you think keeping them trapped was better? Ewan said. Blackwell opened his mouth, then closed it. Silence answered. Mary shook her head slowly. He never planned for release, she said. Only maintenance. The tunnel shuddered violently, dust raining from the beams. One of the timbers creaked, protesting. Mrs. Dern cried out. The house is failing! Blackwell snapped his cane against the stone again, desperation replacing command. You don't understand, he said to Ewan. If the anchors break, the house collapses into the fault. Everything here, gone. Ewan's gaze flicked to the children. And if nothing changes, they stay. The lamp flared, heat washing over his hand. The flame no longer looked like fire alone. It carried a faint red tint now, threads of light swirling, within it like ink in water. Mary's eyes widened. It's drawing from them, she whispered. From what he took. Ewan swallowed. Can I give it back? Blackwell's eyes snapped to the lamp. No, he barked. You'll overload it. Or free them, Ewan shot back. The crack spread, branching like veins through the stone. The archway's red glow surged, then flickered. Blackwell lunged forward suddenly, reaching for the lamp again. You will doom us all. Ewan twisted away, instinct and something deeper guiding him. The lamp swung wide. Its flame flaring so bright the tunnel washed white for a heartbeat. Blackwell screamed, not in pain but in shock, as the light touched him. He staggered back, clutching his chest, face contorting as if something inside him had been yanked loose. What did you do? He gasped. Ewan stared at the lamp, heart pounding. I don't know. Mary stared too, awe cutting through her fear. It's taking back what he stored in you. Blackwell collapsed to one knee, cane clattering away. His lantern fell, rolling until it struck a stone and went out, plunging half the tunnel into shadow. The children cried out again, louder now, their forms shimmering faintly, as if their outlines were loosening. Mrs. Dern grabbed Ewan's arm. This is wrong, she said, panic rising. If the house falls— Ewan looked at her. It was already wrong. The floor cracked with a sharp report, the fissure splitting wider. Red light surged up, bathing the tunnel in a bloody glow. From the depths came a sound like stone grinding against stone, mixed with something else, a layered echo of voices, too many to count, whispering at once. The fault was opening. Blackwell dragged himself backward, eyes wild. You'll tear the seam, he shouted. There won't be anything left to hold them. Mary turned to Ewan, fear and resolve mingling in her gaze. He's right about one thing, she said. The house is the only shape that's been holding us together. Ewan's heart sank. Then what do we do? Mary took a breath she didn't need. We choose. The lamp flared again, responding to her words. Blackwell laughed weakly, hysteria edging his voice. Choice, he rasped. You think choice matters here? Ewan met his gaze. It does now. The crack widened into a jagged opening, red light pouring out in a steady stream. The children began to sway, some crying, S. Ohm reaching toward Ewan, others shrinking back. Mrs. Dern sank to her knees. I never meant for this, she whispered. Ewan knelt beside her briefly. You meant to stop it, he said. That counts. The whispering from below rose to a crescendo, voices overlapping, not pleading, not commanding, waiting. Ewan stood. The lamp felt like an anchor in his hand, pulling downward, toward the opening. He felt images flash through his mind, children running, growing, aging. Lives that should have unfolded but had been compressed into fuel. Mary stepped to his side. If you open it fully, she said softly, the house won't be able to hold us anymore. Ewan nodded. And if I don't? She met his eyes. We stay. Blackwell laughed bitterly. And when the fault swallows the village, the fields? The world beyond your sentiment? Ewan turned to him. You don't know that. Blackwell's voice dropped to a whisper. I know enough. The tunnel shook again, beams groaning. A support cracked, splintering. Mrs. Dern screamed. Ewan raised the lamp, heart hammering. The flame roared, filling the space with heat and light, red threads swirling violently now. Listen, he said, voice echoing strangely. All of you. The children looked at him, really looked. Some with hope, some with terror. I can't promise what's beyond, Ewan said. But I can promise this, it won't be him. Blackwell snarled. You arrogant. Ewan swung the lamp downward, not striking the stone but opening the glass chimney with a sharp twist he didn't remember learning. The flame leapt free, it did not fall. It surged downward into the crack like a living thing, light pouring into the fault. The whispering exploded into sound, voices shouting, laughing, crying, as if centuries were being uncorked at once. The red glow flared blindingly bright. The children screamed, not in pain but in release, as their forms blurred, outlines stretching, then snapping back into clearer shapes. They staggered, coughing, hands clutching at their chests as if something heavy had been lifted. Blackwell howled as the light struck him full on. His body convulsed, face aging rapidly, lines carving deep as years tore through him. He clawed at the stone, nails scraping. No, he gasped. I held it. The fault roared. Stone cracked. The archway split, chunks falling inward. Mrs. Dern covered her face, sobbing. Ewan grabbed Mari, pulling her close as the ground lurched violently. The tunnel walls seemed to bend, shadows warping, light twisting into impossible angles. Then, abruptly, the roar cut off. Silence slammed down, heavy and complete. Ewan opened his eyes. The red light was gone. The crack had sealed, not neatly but brutally. Stone fused and warped as if melted and forced back together. The archway was shattered, rubble blocking the passage where the red room had been. Dust hung thick in the air. The lamp flame, now free of its glass, hovered for a heartbeat longer, then collapsed inward, winking out. Darkness fell. For a moment no one spoke. Then a cough broke the silence, another, the sound of breathing, ragged, human, real. Ewan felt Mary shift in his arms. She pulled back, blinking, confused. Ewan, she whispered. Her voice sounded younger, lighter. He held her face gently, heart pounding. I'm here. Around them, children stirred, some crying openly now, others staring at their hands, their feet, the world as if seeing it for the first time. Mrs. Dern sobbed openly. They're alive, Ewan finished. A groan sounded from the rubble. Blackwell's voice, thin, weak, aged beyond recognition. You've destroyed everything. Ewan turned. Blackwell lay half buried under fallen stone, his face ravaged by years that had finally claimed their due. His eyes burned with hatred and fear. Ewan approached slowly. No, he said. I ended it. Blackwell laughed weakly. You think this is the end? He rasped. The fault remains. You've only changed who feeds it. Juan shook his head. We'll see. Another tremor rippled through the tunnel, smaller this time, like an aftershock. Mary clutched Ewan's arm. The house, she whispered. It's quiet. Ewan listened. For the first time since stepping inside Blackwell, there was no hum, no whisper, no sense of being watched. Only the distant drip of water. The house was listening no longer, or perhaps it had finally gone deaf. The quiet did not feel peaceful. It sat on the tunnel like a weight, heavy and unfamiliar, as if the place itself were holding its breath, uncertain whether it had permission to exhale again. The drip of water echoed too loudly now, each drop a sharp reminder that sound had returned where there had once been a constant hum. Ewan remained still, one arm wrapped protectively around Mari, his other hand empty where the lamp had been. The absence felt strange, like missing a limb he hadn't known he relied on. Blackwell shifted weakly under the rubble, stones scraping as he tried and failed to push himself upright. His breath rattled in his chest, wet and uneven. The man who had commanded the tunnel moments ago now looked small, folded in on himself by time that had finally been allowed to move again. You think silence means safety, Blackwell rasped. That's how it tricks you. Ewan turned toward him slowly. You don't get to explain anything anymore. Blackwell laughed, a thin, broken sound. Explain? I'm the only one who ever did. Mary tightened her grip on Ewan's sleeve. Her eyes never left Blackwell. He's still trying, she whispered. He always tries. Mrs. Dern rose shakily from her knees, her face streaked with dust and tears. She looked around the tunnel as if seeing it for the first time. Not as a mechanism, not as a prison, but as a place where people had suffered. "The children," she said softly. "We have to get them out, now." Ewan nodded. He looked at the cluster of children around them, some clinging to each other, some sitting stunned on the damp ground, all of them breathing, shivering, real. "Can you walk?" he asked gently. A few nodded. A few shook their heads. One small boy pressed his palms to his ears, as if afraid the hum might return. "It's gone," Ewan said quietly, crouching to their level. "It's not listening anymore." The words felt dangerous, like tempting fate, but the tunnel did not respond. No vibration, no whisper. Mrs. Dern moved among them, touching shoulders, murmuring reassurance. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady now, as if a role she'd abandoned years ago had returned in a different shape. "We go back the way we came," she said. "The Mercy Way should still be open." Blackwell coughed again, blood flecking his lips. "It won't be," he whispered. "The house seals what it can't control." Ewan watched him carefully. "You don't sound certain." Blackwell's eyes flicked away. "Nothing is certain now." A low groan rolled through the stone, not violent but deep, like a structure settling after strain. Dust sifted from the beams again, but the tunnel held. Mary leaned close to Ewan. "He's afraid," she said almost wonderingly. "I've never seen that." Ewan rose slowly. "Good." They began to move. Mrs. Dern led, guiding the children carefully over damp stone and around fallen debris. Ewan stayed near the back with Mary, watching Blackwell out of the corner of his eye. "You can't leave me here," Blackwell called weakly. "You don't know what I've been holding back." Ewan stopped. He turned fully to face him. "You told me the house needed feeding," Ewan said. "You told me it would collapse without anchors." Blackwell swallowed. "Yes." "And now?" Blackwell hesitated. The pause was answer enough. Ewan exhaled slowly. "You don't know what happens next." Blackwell's voice dropped to a whisper. "I know it won't forgive you." Ewan shook his head. "I'm not asking for forgiveness." Another tremor passed through the tunnel, lighter than before. Somewhere, far above, stone shifted. Mrs. Dern looked back sharply. "We don't have time." Ewan nodded and turned away from Blackwell. They reached the base of the hidden stair. The opening in the wall still yawned above them, bricks warped and uneven, the canvas hanging loose like a torn bandage. Cold air flowed down, carrying the faint scent of the infirmary. Spirits and herbs and something cleaner now, less tainted. Mrs. Dern climbed first, moving slowly but steadily, helping children up one by one. Ewan followed, lifting those too weak to climb on their own. Mary stayed close, her hand always finding his sleeve. As Ewan climbed, he felt a strange pressure ease inside his chest, like something long coiled had finally been allowed to loosen. The stair no longer felt hostile. It was simply stone. Halfway up, a sound echoed from below, a sharp crack. Ewan froze. "Keep moving," Mrs. Dern called down urgently. Another crack followed, louder this time, and a section of the tunnel ceiling collapsed where they had been moments before, stone slamming into stone with a deafening roar. Blackwell's scream cut off abruptly. Dust surged upward, choking the stairwell. Ewan coughed, pulling Mari close as they pushed upward. The stair shuddered but held. They burst through the opening, into the infirmary, just as the wall behind them groaned and shifted. Mrs. Dern slammed the bricks back into place with frantic strength, pressing until they locked with a final, decisive click. Silence followed, not the heavy, watchful silence from before, but the ordinary kind, broken only by coughing and sobbing and the distant creak of an old building settling. The infirmary looked smaller now, more ordinary. The beds were empty. The air, though still sharp with spirits, no longer carried that metallic undertone. Ewan looked at the bed where the breathing shape had been. Nothing. Mary stared at it too, then let out a shaky laugh that turned into tears. "It's gone," she said. "I don't feel it anymore." Mrs. Dern sank onto one of the beds, covering her face with her hands. "I should never have let him. You didn't do this alone," Ewan said gently, "and you're stopping it now." Another tremor rippled through the building, lighter than before, like a sigh. Ewan moved to the infirmary door and cracked it open. The corridor beyond was empty. No footprints, no shadows stretching where they shouldn't. Just a long, dim hall with worn boards and faded portraits staring blankly ahead. "They're gone," he murmured. Mary stepped beside him, peering out. "The house feels hollow." Mrs. Dern looked up sharply. "Hollow." Mary nodded slowly, like it lost something it thought was part of itself. Ewan's stomach tightened, or like it lost something that was filling a wound. They guided the children into the corridor, keeping them close. As they moved, Ewan noticed small details he'd missed before. The chipped paint, the cracked plaster, the way the building felt older now. Truly old, not preserved by something unnatural. They reached the main hall. God sees all still loomed above the hearth, but the words looked less commanding now, more like a relic of belief rather than an active threat. One of the children, a girl with dark braids, looked up at it and frowned. "Is that true?" she asked quietly. Ewan hesitated, then answered honestly, "I don't know." They moved toward the front door. The dead tree outside scraped faintly against the stone in the wind. Rain tapped gently on the roof. Mrs. Dern reached the door first and placed her hand on it, pausing as if afraid it might refuse to open. She pulled. The door opened easily. Cool night air rushed in, clean and sharp. Moonlight spilled across the threshold, silver and real. The children blinked, shielding their eyes. Ewan stepped outside, drawing in a breath that tasted like rain and grass and freedom. For the first time since arriving, the air did not feel heavy. Behind him, the children spilled into the courtyard, some laughing shakily, some crying openly, some simply staring at the sky as if it were a miracle they had forgotten existed. Mary stepped out beside him, her face lifted to the moon. "It's big," she whispered. Ewan smiled faintly. "It always was." A sound came from behind them, a deep settling groan from within the orphanage. Stones shifted, a crack ran along the front wall, then stopped. Mrs. Dern turned pale. "It's still standing." Ewan watched the building carefully, for now. The ground beneath their feet trembled once more, then stilled. The house did not collapse, it did not chase them, it simply stood, silent and wounded. Ewan turned to Mrs. Dern. "We need help, doctors, officials, people who will write things down." Her mouth tightened. "And if they don't believe us?" Ewan looked at the children. "They'll have to." Mary tugged his sleeve. "Ewan, something's wrong." He looked down at her. "What?" She pressed her hand to her chest, frowning. "I feel thinner, like part of me stayed behind." Ewan's heart sank. "Mary," before he could finish, another tremor rippled through the ground, stronger than before. The orphanage shuddered, a long crack running up its side. The children cried out. Mrs. Dern grabbed the doorframe. "It's collapsing." Ewan pulled Mary close. "Move away." They backed into the courtyard as stone cracked and mortar crumbled. The front wall sagged, then held, just barely. Dust poured from the windows. Then the shaking stopped. The building remained standing, broken but intact. Silence fell again. Ewan's heart pounded. "That wasn't normal." Mary nodded slowly. "The house is trying to hold itself together." Mrs. Dern whispered, "Without him." Ewan stared at the cracked stone. Without the anchors. A thought chilled him. If the house had been fed by stolen time. "What happens to all that time now?" he asked quietly. Mary looked at him, eyes wide with dawning fear. "It has to go somewhere." As if in answer, a distant sound drifted across the moor, a low, patient tapping, far away but unmistakable. Tap, tap. Ewan's blood ran cold. Mary clutched his arm. "That's not the house," she whispered. The tapping came again, closer this time, echoing faintly through the night. Tap, tap. Ewan turned slowly toward the dark expanse of bogland beyond the courtyard. Something out there was listening now, and it had learned how to walk. The tapping did not hurry. That was what unsettled Ewan most. It came again at the same measured pace, neither closer nor farther, as if whatever produced it had all the time in the world and intended to use every second. Tap, tap. The sound carried across the bog, muffled by mist yet unmistakably deliberate, like wood against stone, or bone against earth. The children pressed closer together instinctively, their earlier cries giving way to a shared, breath-held silence. Even the youngest seemed to understand that running without knowing where would be worse than standing still. Mrs. Dern's hand trembled as she gripped the doorframe. "That isn't possible," she whispered. "The vault was sealed." Mary shook her head slowly. "Not sealed," she said. "Closed. There's a difference." Ewan stared into the dark beyond the courtyard. The bog stretched outward in low, uneven swells, patches of water catching moonlight like scattered eyes. The tapping came from somewhere within it, hidden by reeds and mist but moving. "What is it?" one of the children whispered. Ewan didn't answer immediately. His mind raced through everything Blackwell had said, everything he had not said. "The house doesn't forgive," Blackwell had warned. Ewan swallowed. "It's what was underneath," he said finally. what the house was sitting on. The tapping paused. For a heartbeat the moor was utterly still. Then the sound resumed, closer now. Tap. The ground beneath Ewan's boots vibrated faintly, not like an earthquake but Ike pressure shifting far below. Mary tightened her grip on his arm. It followed the time, she said softly. When you released it, it needed somewhere else to settle. Mrs. Dern's face drained of color. The village, she whispered. God help us. No, Ewan said, sharper than he meant to. Not if we move first. The tapping changed rhythm slightly, still slow but more curious now, as if testing distance. Tap. Pause. Tap. Ewan felt a pull in his chest, the same sensation the lamp had given him underground. Weaker now but unmistakable. It recognizes you, Mary said quietly. Ewan nodded grimly. Because I opened the door. A ripple moved through the mist, not a shape, yet, but a distortion, like air bending around something solid that refused to show itself fully. One of the children sobbed softly. Mrs. Dern turned to Ewan. We can't fight it, she said. We barely escaped the house. Ewan's jaw tightened. We don't fight it, he said. We lead it. She stared at him. Where? Back to where it belongs, Ewan said, or far enough away that it can't root itself again. Mary's eyes widened. You mean the bog? Ewan nodded. It's already tied to it, that's where the fault began. The tapping stopped again. The silence stretched. Then from the mist a shape began to emerge. Not fully, not yet. The outline was wrong. Too tall, too narrow, like a man stretched by distance. Where its feet should have been, the ground darkened and sank slightly, water seeping up as if pressed by weight. The tapping resumed. Tap. A long limb lowered, ending in something that was not quite a hand, not quite a tool. Hard to focus on, as if the eye slid off it when trying to understand. Mary inhaled sharply. It's learning shape. Ewan felt cold spread along his spine. Then we don't give it time. He stepped forward. Mrs. Dern grabbed his sleeve. You can't. I already did, Ewan said quietly, pulling free. The shape paused, its outline flickering. The tapping stopped. For a moment nothing happened. Then the shape tilted, an approximation of a head turning. The air shifted, thickening, pressing against Ewan's chest. Mary cried out. Ewan, wait! He kept walking, boots crunching on gravel at the edge of the courtyard. The children whimpered behind him, but none followed. Listen to me, Ewan said aloud, his voice carrying oddly well across the bog. You don't belong here. The shape did not respond, but the ground trembled faintly. Ewan swallowed. You were held, fed, used. A ripple passed through the mist like a shiver. You don't need to be, Ewan continued. Not like that. The tapping resumed. Faster now. Tap. Tap. The shape took a step forward, bog water rippling outward. Mary's voice trembled behind him. It's drawn to certainty, she said. That's what he fed it. Ewan nodded slightly, not turning. Then we give it something else. He stepped fully onto the bog. The ground squelched beneath his boot, cold water seeping in. The pull in his chest intensified like a rope tightening. Mrs. Dern screamed his name. Ewan raised his hands slowly, empty, palms open. You don't need anchors, he said. You don't need children. The shape loomed closer now, its outline sharpening just enough to be terrifying. Where its face might have been, there was only darkness. Depth without bottom. Tap. The sound echoed inside Ewan's skull. You need an ending, he said softly. Not a feeding. The shape froze. For a heartbeat, Ewan felt something press against his mind. Not words, not images, but weight, pressure, an ancient insistence on continuation. Ewan's knees buckled slightly, but he held his ground. You were never meant to last forever, he whispered. Neither was the house. The pressure wavered. Behind him, Mary stepped forward, despite Mrs. Dern's attempt to hold her back. Ewan, Mrs. Dern cried. Mary's voice cut through the mist. He's right, she said, her voice thin but clear. Yo, don't need us anymore. The shape quivered. Ewan felt something loosen inside his chest, as if a knot were being carefully untied. We'll remember you, he said, but we won't feed you. The tapping slowed. Tap, pause, tap, then hesitation. The shape began to sink, not collapsing, but withdrawing, as if reconsidering its form. The mist thickened around it, swallowing edges. Ewan staggered as the pressure eased, dropping to one knee in the cold water. Mary rushed to him, grabbing his shoulders. "Ewan." "I'm all right," he gasped. "I think it's listening." The shape retreated another step, its outline blurring, losing definition. The tapping faded, becoming distant, then muffled, then gone. The bog stilled. Silence returned, real silence this time, empty of intent. Ewan sagged forward, hands sinking into wet earth. Mary held him upright, her own breath shaking. Mrs. Dern and the children watched from the courtyard, frozen. Slowly, carefully, Ewan pushed himself to his feet and turned back. "It's gone," he said hoarsely. "For now." Mary nodded, eyes shining with exhausted relief. "It doesn't have a shape anymore." They made their way back to solid ground together. As Ewan stepped onto the courtyard stone again, his legs nearly gave out. Mrs. Dern rushed forward, steadying him. "You shouldn't have done that," she said through tears. Ewan managed a tired smile. "Someone had to." The children gathered around, whispering, touching his coat as if to reassure themselves he was real. The orphanage loomed behind them, cracked and wounded, but silent. For a long moment no one spoke. Then one of the children, a small girl with tangled hair, looked up at Mrs. Dern. "Where do we go now?" she asked. Mrs. Dern looked helplessly at Ewan. He took a deep breath. "Somewhere with light," he said. "Somewhere with people who will write your names down and keep them written." Mary squeezed his hand. "And you?" Ewan glanced back at Blackwell Orphanage, its windows dark, its doors open like a mouth that had finally learned to close. "I stay long enough to make sure it doesn't wake again," he said. "Then I follow." A faint crack echoed from within the building. Not violent, final. A stone slipped free from the upper wall and shattered in the courtyard. The house settled. Mrs. Dern crossed herself. "It's over," she whispered. Ewan wasn't sure that was true, but as the moon broke fully through the clouds and light washed over the broken stone, one thing was certain. Blackwell Orphanage was no longer listening, and whatever had learned to walk in the dark had chosen, for the moment, to lie down again. Far beneath the bog, something shifted once, then went still. Far beneath the bog, something shifted once, then went still. The stillness held. Ewan stood in the courtyard long after the children's whispers faded into exhausted murmurs. Moonlight pooled in the cracks of the stone like water finding old paths. The orphanage behind him no longer breathed. It did not lean toward him. It did not echo his thoughts back at him. It was only a building again. Wounded, emptied, and finally ordinary. He let himself believe that for a moment. Then the wind changed. Not sharply, not violently, just enough to carry the smell of peat and wet grass across the yard. The children drew closer together without being told, their bodies remembering something their minds were too tired to name. Mrs. Dern watched the house with the wary attention of someone who had lived too long under rules that shifted when you weren't looking. Mari leaned against Ewan's side. She was breathing easily now, but her fingers kept flexing, as if testing their own reality. "Do you feel it?" she asked quietly. Ewan closed his eyes. There was no pull in his chest anymore, no tugging thread, no sense of being counted or measured. "I feel tired," he said, "and human." Mary laughed softly at that, a sound so small and sincere it almost who. "That's new for me." Mrs. Dern straightened, smoothing her dress with hands that still shook. "We must leave," she said, "before dawn, before anyone else comes." Ewan nodded. "We'll go to the village first," he said, "the magistrate, the doctor." Clean, steady fall that smelled of soil and renewal. He stepped outside. The village lay quiet, lamps dimmed, windows dark. The bog stretched beyond, mist rising gently as the rain fell. Ewan watched it for a long time. There was no tapping, no movement, only water finding water. He exhaled. Behind him, Mary appeared, wrapped in a blanket, her hair damp with rain. "You're looking for it," she said. He didn't deny it. "I want to be sure." She stood beside him. "Some things don't end," she said softly. "They just stop being hungry." Ewan considered that. "And if it wakes again," Mary met his gaze, "then it won't be alone anymore." The rain softened, then eased. Days passed. Officials came and went. Stories spread. Blackwell Orphanage was sealed, investigated, then quietly dismantled piece by piece. Stone was carted away. The land beneath was drained and examined and declared unstable. No one built there again. The children were placed where they could be. Some reunited with family. Some went to homes that tried their best and sometimes failed. None returned to Blackwell. Mrs. Dern remained in the village, smaller somehow without the house leaning on her. She worked in the infirmary, careful and kind, Her penitent energy turned toward mending rather than maintaining. Ewan stayed longer than he planned. He wrote reports. He corrected records. He ensured the blank lines were filled, not with excuses, but with names and dates and truths. One evening, as the sun set red over the moor, Mari sat beside him on the low stone wall near the road. "You could go back to Edinburgh," she said. He nodded. "I could. Will you?" He thought of the records office, of ledgers that waited to be filled. He thought of the note that had appeared where it should not have been. "Eventually," he said. "But not yet." She smiled. "Good." He glanced at her. "And you?" She looked out over the bog. "I want to walk," she said. "I want to see what time does when it's allowed to pass." Ewan felt something like pride swell in his chest. "You should." They sat in silence, watching the light fade. Far away, deep beneath the peat and water, something ancient rested. Not dreaming, not listening, simply existing in a way that did not require taking. Time moved on, it did not die. And for the first time in living memory, it belonged to the children who had been denied it. The end.